You're lying in bed, and you're explaining yourself to someone who isn't in the room, not out loud, just in your head, where the real courtroom lives. You're walking through the same exchange again, the one you never actually had, building your case sentence by sentence. You add a pause in the right place. You soften a word that came out too sharp earlier today. You imagine the exact look on their face when you finally say the thing you didn't say this afternoon. The argument is airtight by now. You've rehearsed it so many times it almost feels like it already happened. But here's what you don't notice while you're doing it. Nobody asked you to defend yourself tonight. Nobody is cross-examining you. The person you're arguing with is asleep somewhere, completely unaware that a trial is being held in their name. Or maybe they're scrolling their phone, thinking about something else entirely, with no idea you've spent the last 40 minutes preparing a closing statement for a case they never opened. You are the only one in the room, and yet you're running a full proceeding, complete with evidence, testimony, and a verdict you've already half decided to accept. This isn't really about tonight's conversation. It's about something quieter, something you've been doing for years without ever naming it. You run a courtroom inside your head, and somewhere along the way, you assigned yourself 3 jobs at once. You're the one being judged, you're the one defending, and you're the one handing down the ruling before anyone else has even walked through the door. The exhausting part of your day was never the day itself. It's the trial you hold afterward, every night, for an audience that was never actually watching. You've probably called this overthinking before and moved on without looking closer. But overthinking is too soft a word for what's actually happening. A courtroom has structure. It has roles, procedures, a sequence that repeats itself the same way every time. And once you see that structure clearly, you start noticing how often you step into it without deciding to, the way you might walk into a familiar room out of habit, long after you stopped needing to be there at all. You build airtight cases for decisions nobody has challenged. Think about the last time you made a choice that nobody questioned. You said no to something. You changed a plan. You left a conversation early. And somewhere in the hours that followed, without anyone asking a single question, you started building a defense anyway. Reasons stacked on top of reasons. Proof you didn't need to gather because no one had requested it. You weren't preparing for an argument that was happening. You were preparing for one that might never come at all. You can probably feel how automatic this is. The moment a decision leaves your hands, some part of you starts drafting the explanation for it, just in case. In case someone brings it up. In case someone disagrees. In case you need to defend a choice that in reality belongs entirely to you and to no one else. You treat your own decisions like they're on trial the second you make them, long before any actual courtroom has formed. Epictetus spent much of his life teaching one separation, over and over, in as many ways as he could find. The line between what belongs to you and what doesn't. Your choices belong to you. Other people's opinions about your choices were never yours to manage, he said. Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. What he meant wasn't complicated, though it rarely feels simple when you're the one living it. The decision is yours to make. The verdict someone else might eventually pass on it was never yours to control, no matter how many hours you spend rehearsing a trial that exists only inside you. You can prepare the most reasonable case in the world, and somewhere, someone will still misunderstand you anyway. The defense was never going to make you safe. It was only ever going to make you tired. You build these cases because some part of you believes that if the argument is airtight enough, you'll finally be protected from judgment. But protection was never the actual outcome. Exhaustion was. And the strange part is, The decision was already fine before you started defending it. It didn't need your help. It just needed you to stop putting it on trial. Try this the next time you catch yourself building a case nobody requested. Ask one simple question before you go any further. Did anyone actually ask me to explain this? If the answer is no, you can let the unfinished defense sit there, unused, and return your attention to whatever is actually happening in front of you. The decision doesn't disappear just because you stopped defending it. It just stops costing you anything extra. You rehearse apologies for choices that required none. Notice how often you draft an explanation before anyone has even reacted to anything. A message you send with 3 extra sentences justifying why you didn't reply sooner, even though the person hadn't said a word about it. A version of events you quietly prepare in case someone brings up why you left the gathering early. You hand out apologies in advance to people who haven't asked a single question, as if your own silence is an accusation that needs an immediate answer. This habit usually starts somewhere specific, even if you've forgotten exactly where. You learned at some point that being misunderstood felt dangerous, that an explanation was the safest way to stay in good standing with the people around you. So you kept explaining. You got good at it. You built a whole internal department whose only job was producing justifications on demand, ready before anyone even asked for one. And even now, long after the room that taught you this has changed completely, the habit hasn't changed with it. You can test this tonight if you want to. Pay attention to how many of the apologies and justifications running through your head right now are addressed to people who never actually requested one. You are doing the work of an accuser and a defendant for a case that was never filed by anyone but you. And every minute spent writing that imaginary statement is a minute you didn't spend living the part of your day that's actually in front of you right now, asking for nothing more than your attention. The hardest part of breaking this habit isn't realizing it exists. It's catching it early enough to stop. The explanation forms so quickly, so automatically, that by the time you notice it, half of it is already written. But noticing is still the beginning. The moment you catch yourself preparing a defense for a question nobody asked, you can simply set it down, unfinished, and let the silence stay exactly as it is. No one was waiting on the other end for it anyway. There's a difference worth holding on to here. Explaining yourself to someone who genuinely needs context is generous. Apologizing in advance to someone who hasn't asked anything is a different thing entirely. It's a habit borrowed from somewhere that no longer applies, running on autopilot in rooms where it was never invited. You can keep the generosity and quietly retire the habit. They were never the same thing to begin with, even though they've felt identical for years. You sentence yourself before anyone else gets the chance. Here's the part that's easy to miss. The harshest verdict in your private courtroom rarely comes from someone else. It comes from you, delivered to you, before any outside judgment ever shows up. You replay the awkward thing you said earlier, and you don't just notice it. You convict yourself of it. You call yourself careless, or weak, or too much, using language you would never use on a friend who made the exact same mistake in front of you. This inner verdict is often louder than any criticism you'll ever receive in your life, because it runs completely uncontested. Nobody objects on your behalf. Nobody questions the harshness of the sentence you just handed down. You rule against yourself, and then you serve the sentence personally, sometimes for days, over something that lasted 10 seconds in the actual world. Think about how specific this gets. A small mistake at work turns into a private ruling that you're incompetent. A misread text turns into proof that you're too sensitive. A moment of silence from someone turns into evidence that you're forgettable. None of these rulings were requested by the people involved. You wrote them yourself, signed them yourself, and carried the sentence around for the rest of the day like it was handed to you by someone with actual authority over your worth. The strange thing is, you wouldn't accept this verdict if it came from a stranger. If someone walked up to you on the street and said the exact words you say to yourself in these moments, you'd call it cruelty without hesitating. But because the voice comes from inside, you assume it must be accurate. It isn't. It's just loud, and it's had years of uninterrupted practice with no one in the room to challenge it. You can start challenging it the same way you'd challenge any other unreliable witness. Ask what evidence the verdict is actually built on. Usually you'll find a single moment, blown up far past its original size, standing in for your entire character. One 10-second mistake does not establish a pattern. It's just a moment, and moments are allowed to pass without becoming permanent rulings against you. You can rule once and refuse to reopen the case. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private notes, the ones now known as meditations, almost entirely to remind himself of one idea, repeated in dozens of different forms across years of his own private writing: that the mind he was trying to discipline was the only territory he actually owned. He said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is the discipline underneath closing the court. It isn't about forcing yourself to stop feeling something the moment it happens. It isn't about pretending a decision didn't matter to you. It's simply refusing to retry a case that already reached its verdict the first time. You made the choice. You can stand behind it without reopening the entire file at every single night, just to check whether the ruling still holds up under pressure. Closing the court looks smaller in real life than it sounds when you describe it. It looks like catching yourself mid-rehearsal of an explanation nobody actually requested, and quietly putting it down before finishing the sentence. It looks like noticing the old argument trying to restart itself in your head late at night, and choosing not to pick the gavel back up this time. You don't need a louder defense than the one you already gave yourself the first time around. You need fewer retrials. The case closes the moment you stop reopening it, not the moment everyone else finally agrees with your reasoning. You will feel the pull to reopen it anyway. That's normal. The habit took years to build, and it won't dissolve in one evening just because you understand it now. But each time you notice the pull and choose not to follow it, the case stays a little more closed than it was the night before. That's the entire practice. Not perfection, just fewer retrials than last week. You've been performing for someone who isn't in the room. Picture the audience you've been building your defense for all this time. The disapproving look you imagine, the raised eyebrow, the voice that says you should have done it differently, handled it better, said less, or said more. Now ask yourself honestly, who is actually standing there right now? Most of the time, when you actually look, the answer is nobody. The witness you've been performing for is a composite, stitched together from old criticism, a particular tone someone once used with you, a stranger's passing comment, a fear you've carried since long before you knew better. This witness holds an enormous amount of power over you precisely because it isn't real. A real person can be reasoned with. A real person can change their mind, walk away, forget the whole thing within a week. An imagined witness never leaves the room, because the room only exists inside you in the first place. It watches everything you do. It remembers everything you said wrong. It never gets tired of the trial, because it was never alive to begin with, and things that were never alive don't grow tired the way you do. You can spend years performing for this witness without ever questioning whether it's even watching. You soften your opinions in front of it. You over-prepare for conversations that never happen the way you imagined. You replay old moments specifically for its judgment, as if it kept a transcript somewhere, waiting to compare your current behavior against some version of you it decided was unacceptable. A long time ago. The moment you actually notice this, something in the room shifts. You stop trying to win over an audience that was assembled from fragments of your past, rather than from anyone currently in your life. You start asking a smaller, much more useful question instead. Who, specifically, today, right now, is actually asking me to justify this decision? Usually, when you look closely enough to answer honestly, the room turns out to be empty. You were the only one who ever showed up to watch. This doesn't mean the people in your life don't matter, or that their opinions never carry weight. It means you finally get to separate the people who are actually present from the composite figure your mind built years ago and never retired. A real friend asking a real question deserves a real answer. A ghost assembled from old criticism doesn't. Once you can tell the difference, you stop wasting your best explanations on an audience that was never going to show up to hear them anyway. You can make a decision and let it stay private. Seneca, writing letters to his friend Lucilius about a life spent constantly observed and constantly performing for the people around him, returned again and again to one quiet observation: that most of the suffering people carry was never caused by their actual circumstances. It was caused by their own minds rehearsing disaster long before disaster ever arrived, if it arrived at all. He said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Living off the record means you stop requiring a verdict in order to feel settled about something. You make the choice. You act on it. You let the decision exist on its own without narrating it to an invisible jury for approval afterward. Not every choice you make needs a closing statement attached to it. Not every quiet moment in your day needs evidence gathered in advance, just in case someone questions it later, somewhere, somehow. This is harder than it sounds, because you've spent a long time associating safety with explanation. Explaining felt like protection. Staying quiet felt like exposure. But notice what happens when you let one decision today simply stand on its own. No defense prepared in advance. No imagined cross-examination running quietly in the background while you go about your day. There's a particular kind of stillness there that you haven't felt in a while. Not the stillness of avoidance, where you're just pretending nothing happened. The stillness of someone who no longer needs an audience's permission to know they did the right thing. You start noticing how much lighter a day feels when you're not narrating every choice to someone who was never actually there to hear it. The decision doesn't need your defense to be valid. It just needed you to make it, and then to let it be finished. There's a particular freedom in this that's easy to underestimate until you actually feel it. A decision made off the record doesn't shrink in importance. If anything, it becomes more clearly yours, because it was never diluted by an imagined audience's approval in the first place. You start trusting your own judgment again, not because someone validated it, but because you stopped requiring validation as proof that it was sound. You're going to lie in bed again soon, maybe tonight, maybe a week from now. And somewhere in the dark, your mind is going to start building a case for something nobody has questioned yet. You'll feel the familiar pull to gather evidence, to rehearse the explanation one more time, to perform for the witness who was never really there in the first place. This time, try to notice it before it finishes the first sentence. You don't have to argue the case all the way through to its conclusion. You can simply watch the trial trying to start and choose not to take the stand. Not because the decision doesn't matter to you, but because it already happened, and it was already yours to make in the first place without anyone else's signature required. You might still feel the old pull tomorrow or the day after that, That's fine. The court took years to build, and it won't close permanently after one quiet evening. But each time you catch the trial trying to start and choose not to participate, you're handing yourself back a few more minutes that used to belong to an empty room. Those minutes add up into something that starts to feel, slowly, like your own life again. The court doesn't need to stay in session for the rest of your life. You're the only one who ever held the authority to close it. Maybe tonight, somewhere between one thought and the next. That's exactly what you decide to do.